We are anthropologically constructed as human beings to be interdependent, to be in community, to form societies, to form families, because that's good for our health. And the statistics today, the science of it, the evidence-based research is
Yep.
confirming the wisdom of the scriptures.
Welcome to the Spirit in Mind broadcast with your hosts, Bishop C. Guy Robinson and Dr. Jonathan Shepard, where we explore faith and mental health perspectives on current affairs. Let's get into today's discussion with the Spirit in Mind.
Hello, and welcome to Spirit and Mind, where we discuss contemporary affairs with faith and mental health perspectives. I'm Bishop Guy Robinson, and it is a true blessing to be with you again today. Also grateful for our colleague and co-host, Dr. Jonathan Shepard. Hello, Dr. Shepard.
Yes, and hello, Bishop, and hello to all of our podcast viewers and whatever platform you may be on. It's good to be here again for another episode of Spirit in Mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we thank you for your support and how you've been following us and contributing. We love the dialogue. We love the feedback. We love the interaction. So it's meant to be, a virtual dialogical experience, if you will. And so your feedback is welcome. And there's multiple ways you can stay in touch with us. And Dr. Shepard, you want to run over any of the ways they can stay connected?
Absolutely. So please stay connected. We are so interested in how you're able to learn about the platforms that we are on. We are getting more responses from our YouTube responders or subscribers, I should say. So make sure that you subscribe. So when we go live or when we hit a new podcast episode, when it's released, that you are aware, you get it. We know that people are watching our reels. We know that people are watching full blown episodes or full episodes, I should say. Whatever platform it is, please let us know. You can also email us at spiritinmindhealth@gmail.com. We do go to that email address and we review those emails, look at those comments. And thank you for the comments that you all send through YouTube. So many likes and so many shares that we get, and people will comment right there. So please continue to do that. We're so appreciative. And just let us know how this particular platform is helping you. We're dealing with some real issues. We're providing the biblical principles on how to be able to manage through these mental health issues that we are facing in our current society. So thank you. And we really appreciate all the feedback that you give.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've been, of course, again, as we said, we discuss contemporary affairs with faith and mental health perspectives. And our current series is on something that is really so important, psychologically and theologically, or psycho-spiritually, if you will. We've been talking about the phenomenon of loneliness. And we want to continue that discussion today as we discuss it and look at different aspects of how loneliness is present in our current ethos. And I was really moved a couple of years ago. I read a report, Dr. Shepard, from who was then the current Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He released an 85-page report on what he was calling the epidemic of loneliness, and the effects that it is having on our physical, our mental health, and all of the causes in this complex society. And I was fascinated by it because of the paradox, because we have so many ways of being connected, if you will, from cell phones that those of us who are of a certain age remember the days when phones were landline things and cell phones were a big deal, but having all of this access to persons almost 24/7.
Yeah.
nonstop access, and we have social media ways and followers and supporters and subscribers, and notwithstanding the virtues of any of that, but the irony is we have more ways technologically of being connected, and yet existentially and psychosocially, we have these pervasive feelings of loneliness that in some ways have become more concerning than previous generations that did not have all of those means of connection. And so we're living in that paradoxical space today, and that's the contemporary issue that we want to continue to discuss. Dr. Shepard's going to give us a recap and lead us into today's discussion.
And Bishop, you are so right. It doesn't make sense, if you would, to think that we have all these different devices and platforms, even this particular platform, to stay connected to people, and yet people are experiencing loneliness at a greater scale. There really is. It is a epidemic or endemic, depending on how large scale you're talking.
Yeah.
Think about it. There's some stats, even since our last time that we recorded, that I looked up about loneliness, and we're seeing at least a deaths of 100 people per hour due to loneliness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. Like 100 deaths per hour due to loneliness. Now, what we talked about last time in our podcast is what are some of the physical and mental effects of loneliness. And so I believe that when those mental and physical effects of loneliness take place, that's what's causing these deaths. That's what's leading to the various factors that cause the death, whether it be premature death or not, is leading to this 100 deaths per hour. That's amazing. That is a big stat when you think about that. And what we talked about during our last episode, we talked about some of the physical aspects of what loneliness causes. We'll just run through a few of those. Hypertension, definitely depression. It can make chronic illnesses worse, especially if you're dealing with diabetes, you're dealing with some of the various back pains, or even some of the immunological disorders. I have some close friends of mine who are dealing with multiple sclerosis, some of the other immunological diseases, where you literally don't know what you're going to face from day to day. And it's amazing that if you're not sure what to face or what you're going to face from day to day, that you tend to stay away from people. Because you don't want to embarrass yourself. And then that causes more loneliness because you're not sure, is this going to be a good day? Is this going to be a bad day? Is this going to be a day where I'm able to function? So all these different factors go into that, Bishop. So it's amazing. And I know you dealt with some of the scriptural references in the Bible in regards to how to manage through some of the loneliness, how to be able to manage through of how we deal with those periods of time that even when we can be connected or when we may feel disconnected from God, how God still provides that care for us. So that's just a brief recap of what we talked about last time from our last episode. So we just want to pick up from where we are. If we can, Bishop, can we just...
Yeah, absolutely. I think that point. Well, first, let me say the reason why we're discussing it is because there's help and there's hope. But we're in order or in efforts to inspire the pursuit of help and hope, and that's a big deal because there are. That's why we're discussing it. We're if you will, identifying the problem, so that we will take it seriously and it will inspire the pursuit of help and hope. Because there's some cultural forces, even we can talk about that can influence how we respond to loneliness and whether we even recognize it or whether we acknowledge it. There's some, socialization and gender-related issues. There's some data that shows that men, because we have a harder problem or more of a challenge that is culturally conditioned, not nature, but nurture, in such a way that sees ourselves as being uncomfortably vulnerable when we express our feelings or our emotions. It makes it difficult for men to say, in our cultural context, I'm lonely. Or I would like a friend, or even sometimes to show ourselves friendly. The scriptural part is if someone desires a friend, let him show himself friendly, which means in essence, be the friend you want to see.
Right.
However, there's some vulnerability with that, because now it says, now I have to open up and I have to put myself out there emotionally in efforts to do that. And doing that is sometimes discouraged in our cultural context and to our psychosocial disadvantage. So we're raising these things so that we can say, hey, this is important, and there's help and there's hope for that. Dr. Shepard, you just gave us a list of some of the conditions and situations that are associated with that. And so it's important to think of loneliness as having these really effects on the spirit, mind, and body. And that's just fascinating to me, Dr. Shepard. And so that's why we're taking it seriously, so that but we're taking it seriously in the context of there's help and hope, Dr. Shepard.
And I thank you for saying that, because I even had some feedback, Bishop, after the last time we had our first episode on loneliness. So I've had a couple of people call me and say, well, Shepard, are you lonely? And so it was I knew what they were doing. They were trying to be humorous, but I understand where they were coming from, because it can be, if it's awkward,
Right.
It's awkward when you're talking about loneliness, but yet it's so pervasive in our society. You mentioned something, again, one of the stats that I looked up regarding men, that men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide, with loneliness a key contributing factor. Wow. 4 times more likely to die by suicide, with loneliness being a key contributing factor. So when you think about what happens when a person is having suicidal thoughts, you think about a person who is feeling like they have no other way out but to take their own life. Many times, as Bishop mentioned, there is hope, but when you're suicidal, there's a lack of hope.
Right.
Lack of hope, despair, and you get into a point to where you're overwhelmed. And even though you have the various connections or the platforms for connections, let me say it that way, you still feel overwhelmed. And I know in today's society, Bishop, man, there's just so many different things that we're facing that causes people to feel overwhelmed, and rightfully so. Let's just be real about it. There are some real things that are occurring that some of us never thought we would see in our lives, where jobs are no longer available, affordability for groceries, various things that we would take for granted, just to see how inflation, how we see how things that we were once paying for last year, how those prices have increased. People not having the resources to pay for whatever things that they are in need of. Jobs are being cut. Grants are being cut because of certain administrations deciding that this no longer is our priority. And these things are weighing on people and causing them to want to take their own lives. Working in DC, we have seen where now we've actually had to put up protective barriers on the bridges that go over these overpasses, because there's just more people who are literally taking their own lives by jumping off of them. So this feeling of being overwhelmed, lack of hope, and despair definitely is pervasive in the land, and we see it more, 4 times more likely in men who are experiencing loneliness. Now, a bishop may want to chime in more on this, but if we stay there, we want to reach out to the men who may be listening to this podcast episode to let you know, first of all, you're not alone. And we understand that it does require more vulnerability and more courage to admit when you are feeling alone. And that's one of the reasons why, even you see, just for instance, I have on this sweatshirt, inhaling courage and exhaling fear. It really does take a courageous person to be able to admit that when you are feeling like that. Um, I mentioned earlier that you could have a doctor's report. You can have some other chronic illnesses that will lead you to that point. One of the things about with men, and then I'll stop right there, is that when we find out bad news, we would tend to internalize that.
Absolutely.
We will internalize that thing and we'll just hold on to it. And one thing about internalizing, it's going to end up showing up somewhere else if we don't talk about it. And so I hear you on that. And I hear someone may have gotten a bad report, may have gotten some news that they didn't want to hear. I'm thinking about even my own personal situations, family, and things like that as we work through certain things. We've gotten some bad reports. I know what that's like. I know what that's like even for my own self in regards to receiving reports on hypertension and you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, and yet still there's things that happen within your body. Because Bishop, again, we'll talk more about this. Our bodies are still frail, and even though you do the work, the body is still frail. It may. I've even heard where people feel like their bodies have turned their backs on them. Like you do all the work and whatnot, and you feel like your body has kind of rejected you. And so we internalize those things as men. That's where I was. We internalize those things as men, and we want to make sure that even in this particular episode, you're not alone. We're here to help. We want you to know that it's normal to internalize. I want to say it's normal to internalize, but it's not normal to keep it there to where you're now facing the ill effects of not being able to share, those ill effects of not being able to let other people know what's going on. We're definitely built for community. I'll stop there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, and I've said this on the previous episode when we're dealing with it, but that's the wisdom of Scripture, ancient wisdom of Scripture. It still proves to be relevant and true today. It is not good for us to be alone. Genesis starts that way in the Judeo-Christian tradition. It is not good for us to be alone. That is what God said. And, it's worth reiterating this in this culture because we wrestle with what family therapist Michael P. Nichols calls the myth of the American hero. And the myth of the American hero is that I'm totally strong, I'm invincible, and I'm all by myself. With the sheer force of my will, I am by myself conquering every problem and dealing with everything. It's a mythological image. In some ways, you may perhaps associate it with the feeling of arriving to this country and settling a wilderness, but that whole idea has created this mythological image that we are doing it by ourselves, and anything that is in community or needing help is somehow less masculine, less Western, and even less American because of the strong emphasis on independence in our social conditioning. However, so it's important because it spills over into our theology, and we do a lot of talk about personal salvation. And that is a part of our theological experience. But what's interesting is when we see this, while we're filming this particular edition, it's football season, and so you see people still holding up the signs, John 3:16, and all of that, where that says, "God so loved the world." That word in the original language of the text, "world," really means cosmos, which means the systemic arrangement, which means the interaction of parts in interdependence, and so, but we tend to think of our salvation even as a strictly personal thing. But there's also a such thing as social holiness, and that looks like justice and doing mercy and love and compassion and beloved community. And so there's this interdependence that we really have. So that even influences us. So sometimes we are in church, but in isolation, so to speak, in faith community, and then we isolate ourselves. That has the sound of, I just come in, get what I need, and go about my business. That's an extension of that, when actually we're called to be involved, and it's perpetuating these challenges with loneliness. So anyway, God says to Adam, it is not good for us to be alone. For man to be alone. To all who have that argument of like, it's just me and God and I'm good, I don't need faith community. Well, it was just Adam and God. and Adam could have taken the argument, I know God for myself and by myself. And God said, that may be true right now, but it's not good for you. Ultimately, you need another human being with whom you can experience life, a help mate. You need help, human help, to get through this experience. And so it's okay. The point is, we are anthropologically constructed as human beings to be interdependent, to be in community, to form societies, to form families, because that's good for our health. And the statistics today, the science of it, the evidence-based research is confirming the wisdom of the scriptures.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. If you look at the lifespan, the life expectancy of people, you see that those who are connected, whether they are in marriages or those who are in close proximity to their families, those who stay connected, the life expectancy of those persons is much longer too. And we're talking about 10 years. 10 years is a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, on average, 10 years. A lot can happen in 10 years. So, yeah, that's absolutely true, Bishop.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at Spirit in Mind, and we're also on Instagram at Spirit in Mind Live. Join us next time for a new episode of Spirit in Mind.